They won't pull the trigger, but they'll hand you the gun and point it at their own head. They won't say the words, "it's over," but they'll make you so miserable that ending things feels like your only option for survival. They won't take responsibility for destroying the relationship, but they'll systematically dismantle it piece by piece until you're forced to walk away from the wreckage they created. This is the avoidant's most cowardly and manipulative strategy, orchestrating their own abandonment so they can maintain the illusion that they're the victim rather than the architect of their loneliness. They need you to be the bad guy who gave up on them, the impatient one who couldn't handle their complexity, the shallow person who didn't understand their depth. They need you to break up with them so they can tell themselves and everyone else that they were abandoned rather than admit they drove away someone who loved them. It's emotional manipulation at its most sophisticated level. They create conditions so toxic, so exhausting, so soul-crushing that staying becomes impossible, then act shocked and wounded when you finally reach your breaking point. They push and pull, withdraw and return, give hope and snatch it away until you're so emotionally depleted that leaving feels like self-preservation rather than giving up. But here's what they don't want you to understand. Their behavior isn't random or unconscious. It's a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to force your hand while protecting their ego. They're not confused about what they want. They want out, but they want you to be the one who officially ends it so they can keep their hands clean and their victim narrative intact. The time has come to call out this toxic pattern for what it is and learn how to respond in ways that either force them into real accountability or protect you from becoming their unwilling accomplice in emotional manipulation. Chapter 1. The Coward's Exit Strategy. Let's be brutally honest about what's happening here. Your avoidant partner has turned emotional manipulation into an art form. They've figured out that actually breaking up requires them to be the villain in the story, to take responsibility for ending something good, to face the reality that they're choosing fear over love. So instead, they've developed a coward's exit strategy that lets them destroy the relationship while keeping their hands technically clean. Watch how they operate. They don't say, "I want to break up." That would require courage and honesty. Instead, they say things like, "I need space to figure things out," or "I'm not sure what I want right now," or "This feels too intense for me." They plant seeds of doubt and instability while maintaining plausible deniability about their true intentions. They're not ending things, they're just confused or overwhelmed or going through something. They master the art of being present but unavailable, physically there but emotionally absent. They show up to dates but act distracted. They respond to your texts but with the enthusiasm of someone reading tax documents. They participate in conversations but contribute nothing meaningful. They're systematically draining the life out of your connection while acting like passive victims of circumstances beyond their control. The emotional withdrawal is calculated, not accidental. They start pulling back affection gradually, so you can't point to any specific moment when they stopped trying. They reduce physical intimacy, decrease quality time, minimize meaningful conversations, and eliminate future planning. They're slowly starving the relationship of everything it needs to survive while pretending they don't understand why things feel different. They become masters of mixed signals designed to keep you confused and hoping while simultaneously pushing you toward the exit. One day they're warm and connected, the next they're cold and distant. They'll have an amazing evening with you, then disappear for 3 days without explanation. They'll say they love you, then act like spending time together is a burden. This isn't inconsistency. It's strategic emotional torture designed to make you question your sanity. Their passive-aggressive behavior escalates until every interaction becomes a minefield. They start fights over nothing, blow up minor issues into major conflicts, and respond to your attempts at resolution with stonewalling or dismissive attitudes. They're creating a hostile environment that makes you want to escape while positioning themselves as the reasonable one who's trying to work things out. They begin sabotaging special occasions and important moments, ensuring that your relationship memories become tainted with disappointment and conflict. They'll pick fights right before your birthday, act distant during holidays, or create drama around events you've been looking forward to. They're systematically poisoning the well of your shared experiences. The cruelest part of their strategy is how they respond to your growing frustration with hurt and confusion, as if they have no idea why you're becoming upset. Why are you being so needy? They ask when you request basic emotional connection. You're being too sensitive, they claim, when you address their hurtful behavior. They're gaslighting you into believing that your normal relationship needs are unreasonable demands. They escalate their withdrawal until you're forced to have the talk about where things are going. But even then, they won't give you a straight answer. They'll say they don't know what they want, that they need time, that they're scared of making the wrong decision. They're forcing you to either accept a relationship with no security, commitment, or emotional safety, or be the one who officially ends it. The final stage of their coward's exit strategy is making you do all the emotional labor of the breakup. They won't say it's over, but they'll make continuing feel impossible. They force you to be the one who says the words, makes the decision, and takes the action that they were too emotionally immature to take themselves. Then they get to play the victim who was abandoned by someone who couldn't handle their complexity. This isn't love struggling with fear. This is manipulation disguised as vulnerability. They're not protecting the relationship. They're systematically destroying it while making you complicit in its destruction. They've turned you into an unwilling participant in their emotional cowardice, and it's time to recognize this behavior for the calculated manipulation it actually is. Chapter 2. Playing victim in their own crime scene. The most infuriating aspect of the avoidance manipulation is how they rewrite history to cast themselves as the wounded party in a story where they played both the villain and the director. They don't just orchestrate your breakup, they immediately begin crafting a narrative where they're the innocent victim of your impatience, your unrealistic expectations, your inability to understand their complex emotional needs. Listen to how they tell the story to friends and family. She just couldn't handle that I needed space. He was too needy and clingy. They wanted more than I could give right now. Notice how they've erased their own behavior from the narrative entirely. There's no mention of their emotional withdrawal, their mixed signals, their passive-aggressive tactics, or their systematic sabotage of every good moment you shared. They've edited themselves out of the story, except as the tragic hero who was misunderstood. They conveniently forget that they were the ones who created the very problems they now claim you couldn't handle. They needed space because they made intimacy feel threatening through their own behavior. You became needy because they withheld basic emotional connection until you were starving for affection. You wanted too much because they gave so little that normal relationship expectations felt enormous by comparison. Watch how they reframe their manipulation as evidence of their depth and sensitivity. Their inability to communicate becomes being in touch with their emotions. Their emotional unavailability transforms into protecting their heart. Their passive-aggressive behavior gets rebranded as processing their feelings. They've turned their dysfunction into a badge of honor that makes anyone who couldn't tolerate it seem shallow and impatient. They play up their confusion and inner turmoil as if they were innocent victims of their own psychology, rather than active participants in relationship destruction. I was just trying to figure things out, they claim, as if their figuring out process required treating you like an emotional punching bag. They act like their ambivalence was a natural disaster that happened to them rather than a choice they made repeatedly. The victim narrative serves multiple purposes for their ego protection. First, it allows them to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. If they were just confused and you were impatient, then the breakup was really your fault for not being understanding enough. Second, it preserves their self-image as someone who's capable of love, rather than someone who systematically destroys it. Third, it sets them up to be the sympathetic figure who deserves comfort and support, rather than accountability. They particularly love to focus on how hard the breakup was for them, as if they weren't the ones who engineered it from start to finish. They talk about how much they're suffering, how difficult it is to lose you, how they wish things could have been different. They conveniently omit that they had countless opportunities to make things different and chose their comfort over your connection every single time. Their victim narrative gets even more twisted when they start dating again. Suddenly, they're the wounded soul who was burned by someone who couldn't appreciate their complexity. They use their previous relationship's failure as evidence that they need someone more understanding, more patient, more willing to accept breadcrumbs. They've turned their emotional abuse into a dating strategy. The most manipulative aspect of their victim story is how they use it to maintain contact with you post-breakup. They reach out not to take responsibility or make amends, but to continue the narrative that you both suffered equally in this tragic situation that nobody could control. They want you to validate their version of events, to agree that it was just bad timing or incompatibility, rather than their systematic campaign of emotional withdrawal. They're particularly skilled at using your empathy against you during these post-breakup conversations. They'll share how much they're struggling, how they're in therapy now, how they're working on themselves. But notice they're not actually apologizing for specific behaviors or acknowledging the pain they caused through their choices. They're just painting themselves as someone who's growing through adversity rather than someone who created adversity through selfishness. The victim narrative is their insurance policy against future accountability. As long as they can maintain that the relationship failed due to circumstances beyond their control rather than choices they made repeatedly, they never have to face the reality of their own toxicity. They get to keep their self-image intact while leaving a trail of confused, hurt partners who wonder what they did wrong. This isn't someone who's confused about love. This is someone who's confused about responsibility. They understand exactly what they did. They just refuse to own it, because maintaining their victim status is more comfortable than facing the truth about their behavior. Chapter 3. The toxic pattern of emotional sabotage. Let's call this behavior what it actually is: deliberate relationship sabotage disguised as personal struggle. Your avoidant partner isn't passively struggling with commitment. They're actively undermining every foundation your relationship is built on, while pretending their destructive behavior is just how they process things. This isn't confusion. It's emotional warfare conducted with surgical precision. The sabotage starts subtly with what they call maintaining independence, but what actually amounts to systematic disconnection. They begin refusing to make plans more than a day or two in advance, claiming they don't like to be tied down, while effectively preventing you from building any sense of security or anticipation about your future together. They're not preserving freedom, they're eliminating hope. Watch how they weaponize their past trauma as an excuse for present cruelty. Every time you bring up their hurtful behavior, they deflect to their childhood, their ex who hurt them, their fear of vulnerability. While trauma is real and deserves compassion, using it as a shield against accountability is manipulative. They're essentially saying, I'm allowed to hurt you because someone hurt me first, which is not how healing or healthy relationships work. They become masters of the false emergency, creating crises that conveniently coincide with relationship milestones or moments of increasing intimacy. Just when you're getting closer, suddenly they have a work crisis that requires all their attention, a family drama that needs their immediate focus, or a personal issue that makes them emotionally unavailable. These aren't coincidences. They're escape hatches activated whenever genuine connection threatens their comfort zone. The sexual sabotage is particularly cruel because it targets one of your most vulnerable areas of connection. They'll use intimacy as a weapon, giving and withdrawing it based on their comfort level rather than the natural flow of your relationship. They'll be passionate when they want to draw you back in, then cold and unresponsive when they want to create distance. They're conditioning you to associate physical intimacy with uncertainty and rejection. They excel at the slow fade during conversations, gradually becoming less engaged, less responsive, less present until talking to them feels like performing a one-person show for an audience that's mentally checked out. They're not busy or distracted. They're demonstrating that your thoughts, feelings, and experiences aren't worth their full attention. This isn't communication issues, it's deliberate dismissal. Their social sabotage involves systematically isolating your relationship from meaningful connection with others. They'll resist meeting your friends and family, avoid couple activities with other pairs, and show minimal interest in building shared social experiences. They're keeping your relationship quarantined so that when it fails, there are fewer witnesses to their behavior and less social pressure to work things out. The future sabotage is perhaps most insidious because it kills hope while maintaining plausible deniability. They won't say they don't want a future with you. They'll just respond to any mention of future plans with vague discomfort, change the subject when you talk about long-term goals, and react to discussions about next steps like you're pressuring them into something unreasonable. They're systematically eliminating your ability to build dreams together. They sabotage special occasions with remarkable consistency, picking fights before important events, acting distant during celebrations, or finding ways to make meaningful moments about their discomfort rather than your shared joy. Your birthday becomes about their anxiety about gift giving. Holidays become about their family stress. Anniversaries become about their fear of commitment. They're stealing positive associations and replacing them with conflict and disappointment. The apology sabotage reveals their true intentions most clearly. When forced to apologize for hurtful behavior, they offer non-apologies that actually blame you for their actions. "I'm sorry you felt hurt," instead of "I'm sorry I hurt you." "I'm sorry if I seemed distant," instead of "I'm sorry I withdrew from you." They're going through the motions of accountability while avoiding actual responsibility. They sabotage your attempts to address problems by making every conversation about relationship issues feel like an attack they need to defend against rather than a problem you're trying to solve together. They respond to your concerns with defensiveness, deflection, or stonewalling, ensuring that no real progress can be made while positioning themselves as the victim of your confrontational communication style. The most toxic aspect of their sabotage is how they gaslight you into believing their destructive behavior is normal relationship struggles. They make you question whether your need for consistency, communication, and commitment is reasonable. They convince you that asking for basic relationship security makes you needy, that wanting emotional availability makes you clingy, that expecting follow-through makes you controlling. This pattern isn't accidental or unconscious. It's a systematic campaign to make the relationship so exhausting and unrewarding that leaving feels like your only option for sanity. They're not struggling with love. They're allergic to the accountability that love requires, so they destroy it while making you complicit in its destruction. Chapter 4. The psychology behind their need to be left. Understanding why avoidants orchestrate their own abandonment requires looking beneath their manipulative behavior to the psychological machinery that drives it. This isn't about excusing their toxicity. It's about recognizing the deeper patterns so you can respond more effectively and protect yourself from becoming their emotional accomplice. The avoidance core wound revolves around a terror of being truly seen and found inadequate. Deep down, they believe that if someone really knows them, sees their flaws, understands their limitations, witnesses their struggles, they'll inevitably be rejected. So they've developed a twisted solution: reject others first, but do it in a way that preserves their ego and allows them to maintain the fantasy that they're actually lovable. Being left allows them to maintain the illusion that they were wanted, but the relationship failed due to external circumstances rather than their fundamental inadequacy. If you break up with them, they can tell themselves, "She couldn't handle my complexity," rather than face the more terrifying possibility that she saw who I really am and found it lacking. The abandonment narrative protects them from confronting their deepest fear. Their need to be the victim stems from a psychological defense mechanism that protects their fragile self-worth. Taking responsibility for relationship failure would require them to acknowledge that their choices directly caused pain to someone they claim to care about. This level of accountability feels like psychological death because it forces them to confront the gap between who they want to be and who they actually are. The orchestrated abandonment serves another crucial psychological function. It confirms their worldview that people always leave eventually. They've arranged the ending to match their expectations, which feels safer than risking the possibility that someone might actually stay if they showed up authentically. They'd rather create a predictable rejection than risk an unpredictable acceptance that might require ongoing vulnerability. Their behavior is driven by what psychologists call attachment trauma. Early experiences that taught them love comes with conditions, that emotional needs are burdens, that vulnerability leads to abandonment. Instead of healing these wounds, they've built elaborate strategies to avoid situations that might trigger them. Making you leave ensures they never have to face their deepest fear of being left unexpectedly. The need to be left also protects them from the responsibility of adult decision-making about relationships. Choosing to end things requires them to acknowledge that they had agency, that they could have chosen differently, that they bear responsibility for the outcome. Being left allows them to remain passive victims of circumstances rather than active participants in their own lives. Their psychological setup requires an enemy to function properly. They need you to be the impatient one, the demanding one, the one who couldn't understand them. Without this external villain, they'd have to look inward and confront their own role in relationship destruction. Your breakup becomes essential to their psychological narrative about why their relationships fail. The avoidant often struggles with what therapists call emotional object permanence, the ability to hold on to positive feelings about someone when they're not physically present or when conflict arises. When you're together and things are good, they can access loving feelings. But the moment tension appears or you're apart, those positive emotions seem to evaporate, replaced by doubt and anxiety. This makes sustained intimacy feel impossible because they can't remember why they love you when you're fighting, or why they want to be with you when you're not there. Their need to be left is also connected to a deep shame about their own emotional needs. They've learned to view wanting connection as weakness, needing reassurance as pathetic, requiring emotional support as burdensome. Rather than risk exposing these needs and facing potential rejection, they push you away first. It's a preemptive strike against their own vulnerability. The psychology behind their behavior often includes an unconscious belief that they don't deserve love or that good things don't last. Making you leave confirms these beliefs while protecting them from the anxiety of waiting for the other shoe to drop. They're creating the ending they expect rather than risking the possibility that this time might be different. Understanding this psychology doesn't excuse their behavior, but it explains why traditional relationship approaches often fail with avoidance. They're not operating from a place of rational choice-making about partnership. They're running elaborate psychological protection programs that treat love as a threat to be neutralized rather than an opportunity to be embraced. Their need to be left ultimately stems from a fundamental misunderstanding about what strength means. They believe that needing nothing from no one makes them powerful, when actually it makes them isolated and dependent on their defense mechanisms for survival. True strength would involve risking vulnerability, staying present during discomfort, and choosing love despite their fears. But that would require facing the very psychological wounds they've spent years avoiding. Chapter 5. Breaking the Cycle. What actually works? The key to dealing with avoidant manipulation is refusing to play their game while offering them a different path forward. Stop being their unwilling accomplice in emotional sabotage by calling out their behavior directly and consistently. When they start their withdrawal routine, don't chase or overcompensate. Instead, calmly state what you observe. I notice you've become distant and dismissive. This feels like you're trying to push me away rather than communicate what's actually bothering you. Set clear boundaries around their manipulative tactics. When they give you mixed signals, don't try to decode them. Demand clarity. I need you to tell me directly what you want, rather than making me guess through your behavior. When they create false emergencies to avoid intimacy, acknowledge their stress, but don't let it derail your relationship needs. I understand you're dealing with work stress, and I want to support you, but we still need to address what we discussed about our future. Stop accepting their non-apologies and deflections. When they blame their behavior on past trauma or current stress, respond with, I have empathy for what you've been through, but it doesn't excuse how you're treating me now. I need you to take responsibility for your choices and work on changing them. Don't let their victim narrative prevent accountability. Refuse to be the one who always brings up problems or initiates difficult conversations. Tell them, I've been carrying all the emotional labor in this relationship. I need you to start identifying issues and bringing solutions, not just reacting to what I raise. Force them to be an active participant in relationship maintenance rather than a passive recipient of your efforts. Most importantly, give them a clear choice with real consequences. I love you, but I won't continue in a relationship where I'm being manipulated into doing your emotional dirty work. You can choose to communicate directly, take responsibility for your behavior, and work actively on change, or you can continue these patterns and lose me for real. but I won't be the one to end this. If you want out, you need to be honest about it. This approach either forces them into genuine accountability or exposes their true intentions. Some avoidants, when faced with real consequences and a partner who won't enable their patterns, will choose to do the hard work of change. Others will reveal that they were never truly invested in the relationship's success. Either way, you'll have your answer and can proceed with clarity rather than confusion,